very short break there. Thank you very much, Thillier, for her presentation. Sorry we didn't have time for questions. She has got access to the chat and we'll be going through that. But without further ado, I wanted to introduce Clément from Paris. So I'm not going to try to do my French accent in relation to this because I don't want to get cancelled. But the floor is all yours, Clément, and I'm really looking forward to having you here for your presentation today.
Thank you very much. So yeah, nice to meet you, everyone. Good morning. So I'm Clément Thillier. I'm from Paris University at the I3ASP. And today I'm going to present you an innovative training methodology to improve performance in esports professional players. So for this presentation, I really want to highlight the fact that I'm a researcher for Paris University, but I'm also a coach for an esports team, Carmen Corp. And that's why I got the chance to actually try and do that research on elite players. And that's one of the main goals of my study. So I want to come back a bit more in detail, even though a lot of literature already talked about it, and even though we have already talked about it in previous presenters today and yesterday. But it's really important to put back the basics on the e-sport that actually needs in terms of cognitive and physical performance. So to start with, we actually know that regular esports players actually shows or display higher cognitive attributes than non-players in 88% of the case. And also in specific training with video games, we can actually see that cognitive abilities actually improved in 63% of the non-video game players. Thus, we can hypothesize that these cognitive needs, specifically in terms of executive function, attention control, information processing, long-term memory or visual memory, are actually relevant for its sport performance and needs. The second needs we can talk about is related to physical. We actually know that playing video games or e-sport competitive video games actually increase energy expenditure, oxygen consumption, arterial pressure, with a deterioration of the autonomous nervous system, specifically around competitive period with a sympathetic dominance. And when we looked at the correlation of these different variables, we know actually that autonomous nervous system is important in order to improve executive function that we saw just before, and that executive function may be important in order to improve in-game performance because it's a need that video games players have. So when we look at all this correlation, it may be interesting to look at the strategy used in order to improve cognitive abilities and thus maybe in-game performance. First strategy that is already known in the literature is the physical training that is actually known in order to improve executive functions such as flexible attention, working memory, information processing, but also to improve learning process and acquisition of motor skill. A bit less known and a bit more like recent training is the cognitive motor training, which basically is the physical and motor activation of the body with a simultaneous cognitive impairment. And this kind of training that is a bit less known in the literature may be interesting in order to improve visual search, cognitive allocation, decision making. So different specific need that the esports players may have, different than the the physical training, but also really relevant maybe for their performance. Also, it's important to highlight the fact that effect of training will be different depending on the intensity, mainly for the physical activity, different from the resistance training, high intensity training, or even aerobic training, and different in terms of difficulty, mainly for the cognitive motor training. Indeed, when we look at the literature, we can, for example, see that the change in working memory was significantly greater in the high intensity interval training group because it improved way more the neurotrophic factor as BDNF. In our previous study, we actually looked at the effect of this training and what has been done in the literature. And our results show that there is little to known physical and or cognitive training that has been put in place in Esports, in sport literature, and that there is absolutely none in professional player or elite player from a tier 1 league. So the goal of our study was to stimulate these professional athletes through physical and or cognitive motor training in order to understand how they can influence the physical, cognitive, and specifically, because that's one of the major points of our study, how they influence in-game performance on professional esports player. So for this one, that's how the project were born. And for this one, we actually looked at 2 teams from tier 1 professional player, 1 League of Legends team, and 1 Valorant team playing at Common Corp. The methodology was pretty easy overall. We basically had the 2 types of training, either high intensity, either cognitive motor, who had the same criteria in terms of duration, frequency, or length. But it was really important for ethical reason and in order to not favor any group to another group, that they had a crossover after 4 weeks. So we have they had the same chance to perform in a higher competitive level. For this study, we actually worked on both team of 5 players, and all the 10th players were randomized in either ABC phase design, either ACB phase design. So basically, A is a baseline where we didn't apply any training. In B and C, it's a training which is either the cognitive, either the physical one. And for all the players, we had a multiple baseline design, meaning that we can actually know if the implementation of the training improved or not the performance, and it's not like something just random. This is based in a single case experimental design. You will see a bit later, because it's really important to actually see the specific effect we may observe on this population individually, specifically to the role or even the game played. Overall, we actually gather more than 30 variables in either physical variable, either cognitive variable, either in-game variable. And for the sake of that presentation, I'm only going to focus on 1 League of Legends players that started with the ABC phase design, 1 Valorant players that started with a CB phase design, and I'm only going to look at heart rate variability in terms of result, cognitive flexibility in terms of result, and in-game performance with performance score in terms of result. So, as I explained before, there is many different reasons why we only focus on these 3 aspects, but because based on our result, we observed a lot of contrast depending on the game and depending on the variable. And that's why I really want to highlight that point today. So first things, when we looked at the result, we have the baseline in black, the heat training in yellow, and the cognitive motor training in green. And when we look at the result, we can actually see that both players' results contrast with a significant effect in the overall training in terms of heart rate variability for the League of Legends players, but no result in terms of the Valorant players. This actually contrasts with the literature. When we looked at the literature, we can see that an overall physical or cognitive training should improve heart rate variability. Even though it's still important to look at the result and see that even though it wasn't significant, we can still observe more than an 8% improvement overall for the Valorant players. We can discuss this result in terms of heart rate variability with the initial level of the player. When we looked at the baseline from the League of Legends player, we can see that it was way lower than the Valorant one. And it may thus have influenced our result. There can be a lot of different reasons why it was lower, but since the player haven't done any training at that timing, we may hypothesize that the game in itself may have influenced that heart rate variability, and that playing video games, specifically Valorant, may have improved it. And when we looked at the video game itself, when we look at League of Legends, we can actually see that the game is in a slow tempo and that the action is mainly in mid and late game. On the opposite, and on the contrary, we can see that Valorant is an immersive game in first person, and that the game is sequenced in different rounds. meaning that the variability of the heart rate during the game is way higher than in League of Legends. Thus, playing different game type for 5 years, 10 years, or even 15 years for professional player athletes may have this great already adaptation in terms of heart rate variability. Thus, it's start to be important to take into account first the type of the game. Is it a mobile or first-person shooter? The game in itself, League of Legends or Valorant, but also we can dig deeper and look after the map, for example, for Valorant, but also the role that the both games are playing with, or even the champion or the agent playing during the game. If we looked after, also, it's really important to highlight the fact that heart rate variability was still way better after the high intensity interval training, and that it shows a way better significant effect for both players, either when doing it first, either after the cognitive motor training with a combined effect. Secondly, if we look now at the cognitive flexibility that is actually displayed by the mean reaction time in switch condition. So to make it really easy, we did a dots task, and the switch condition it was when the rule was changed between one trial to another. So basically, when we look at the result, we can actually see an opposite result, but still really relevant of the difference between players, with an improvement, significant improvement for the Valorant players and non-results for the League of Legends players. Once again, this result contrasts with the literature that show that usually with the physical or cognitive training, cognitive flexibility should improve in terms of performance. And this time, even though we see a huge 23% significant improvement for the Valorant players, we show a decrease of performance for the League of Legends one. But once again, when we try to discuss that result, we can see that the League of Legends players had a really lower mean reaction time switch initially during the baseline compared to the Valorant player. So once again, we can think about the effect of playing League of Legends for 5, 10, 15 years before doing that training. And when we look at the player, when we look at the game in itself, we can hypothesize the fact that League of Legends improve executive function, improve task switching by having a lot of activation of this kind of needs during the game, and thus we may have observed a threshold effect that doesn't allow for an improvement within the training. And so that regular stimulation of League of Legends overall improve cognitive flexibility. On the contrary, we can see that the level is really higher during the baseline for the Valorant player, and we may hypothesize the fact that Valorant doesn't stimulate cognitive flexibility enough, and thus no threshold effect, and that we can see an improvement with the training. It's still important to highlight the fact that there is a combined effect of first cognitive motor training and then high intensity interval training. But now the question could be, is improvement of a factor that is not usually improved by the game in itself useful for in-game performance? And that's the last part of our study. When we looked at in-game performance, we looked at a performance score. Performance score is a score that includes more than 20 variables from global, both game and specific game variable that are weighted to the roles and the opponent for the League of Legends score. And when we look at the results are pretty non-significant. And we can actually see the only thing that is actually quite still important to highlight is the fact that for the Valorant players, we can still see an improvement of 6% of the overall performance score with a reduction of the standard deviation of the curve. So it's still a good trend in order to improve performance, but still non-significant, even though we can also highlight the fact that it didn't decrease the overall performance of the player, and we still see an improvement, even though the standard deviation is pretty high. When to discuss this result, we can talk about the different goals that we have. If we don't see any specific huge improvement in terms of global improvement for the League of Legends players, it may be due to the fact that the support will sacrifice himself for the teammate of the expense of his own performance. So he may reduce his own performance score just for the survivability of one of his teammates. So it's not that relevant that we don't see an improvement in the overall performance score. On the contrary, in Valorant, the basic primary objective for each role will be the same. Each player, for example, the Sentinel, will be able to kill just as any other role. Doesn't sacrifice his own performance in order to improve his teammates once. So when we look at that, it starts to be really important to take into account the specific goal of first each game type. Is it a MOBA? Is it a first-person shooters? Then the role in itself, League of Legends or Valorant, the game in itself. Then the role and the map specific for Valorant. Is it a jungler? Is it a mid laner? Is it a sentinel? Is it an initiator? It's like really, it's a variable really important to take into account because it can have an impact on all their physical, cognitive, and in-game variable. And finally, we could even reach a last point when we looked after the champ, specifically because, once again, it doesn't display the same cognitive abilities. And when we looked at this variable, I'm going to show like two specific variables, so gold at 30 minutes in League of Legends and kill participation in Valorant. And when we look at that, the results are still mainly non-significant overall, but we can see a significant effect plus almost 19% improvement for the Valorant player at the end of the training, which is huge when we looked at important specific variable for the game and for the players. And for the League of Legends one, who actually combined looking at the role, but weighted against the opponent, we can still see an improvement of almost 33% of gold at 30 minutes. Even though it wasn't significant, it's still pretty important to highlight. And when we discuss this result and when we looked at our result, we can actually see that there is an improvement based on the length on the training. When we swap from heat training to the cognitive motor training or the cognitive motor to the heat training, we can actually see a significant improvement. So we can discuss this result by looking at first the environmental context. For example, our League of Legends players show a decrease in his performance during the heat training that maybe highlight a lack of recovery. That was improved during the cognitive motor training, and we can also see a combined effect of both training. And the same effect apply for the Valorant players, which display a significant improvement within the second training, which is the heat training, after the cognitive motor training, and show a complementary of the protocol. So, in conclusion, when we look at our result, it's important to highlight the fact that both training are able to improve variable of interest, which is cognitive, physical, or in-game, of professional elite tier 1 players. But it is essential to take into account the inter-individual context of each player, and we should now start to talk about League of Legends players and Valorant players and not esports players, because we actually highlight the fact that it may have a huge impact on all the training that has been done later in order to improve their performance. The goal for us is now to observe the relationship between this physical, this cognitive, and this in-game variable, looking at overall correlation, but also specific to each game type in order to develop optimal training protocol for each sport athlete, but most important, in order to develop optimal training protocol for League of Legends elite athlete and for Valorant elite athlete. Thank you very much for your attention, and I remain available for any question if you have. Thank you very much. And I'm going to put my
So, hello,
back,
I'm back now. You've got loads of questions here, Clément. You've got loads of questions here, Clément. You've got loads of questions here, Clément. You've got loads of questions. So, few things that I want to go through. So I'm going to have a bit of background audio because it's coming through my headset as well as through everything else. So I'm going to go through the questions and try to keep my mic muted in between. First one is from me. So, you know, you get one from me for a change. But the first one I want to look at was, do you think personality also has an influence on heart rate? I think that's the one that I think is one of the things that we talk about when we look at the differences between LoL and Valorant players, is their personality has a huge influence in terms of what game people are attracted to. Do you think that has an influence on heart rate as well?
Yeah. I completely think it does have an influence. Actually, like I said, I have more than I have 10 actually players looking at it, and I only could show two type of players, but when I try to look overall the result that I have and individually for each players, the personality have a huge impact. First, it may have an impact directly, because such different personality may increase their physical activity on a daily basis, but it also may have an impact on their ability to cope with stress, for example, and thus if they have a less more stressor during their overall training, they may thus have a less recovery that can also impact their basal heart rate and different kind of variable. Even cognitive ones can be altered by coping strategy or by stress factors or by different aspects, even social, that can be really highlighted. So I totally agree with that there is an overall a lot of different factors that are really important to take into account. And obviously for obvious reasons, I couldn't talk about everything, but it's really important to highlight the fact that it may be first really important to look after to put the players at the center of the variable, because everyone will be different specifically at that level.
Thank you very much, Clement. The next question, and we can go down holistic methodology on that one quite a lot, and I'm sure me and you will have a catch-up about that at any point. The next one was from Digital Fitness. Thank you very much for the presentation. There's lots of people saying thank you in the chat. I'm not going to be able to go through all the comments, I'm afraid. So I know that Clement will be on chat after this, and he'll be able to answer them in full, I'm sure. But the first thing he wanted, so a very interesting presentation. Do you think it would be crucial in esports performance research in general to distribute between different games and genres?
Yeah, I think we should aim for it. Currently, it's pretty difficult because the prevalence of players, specifically in elite level, is pretty reduced. It's pretty hard to reach this kind of players. So obviously, most of the studies are looking after the esports players. But I hope so that one day we could differentiate Valorant, League of Legends, Rocket League, or any different game type. If I'm quoting the last game type, it can be StarCraft, because the same way we didn't look after sport player, we look after specific sport type or specific sport, and it should be the same for esport, as such different game type may impact their overall basal level because they played for the game for 5, 10, 15 years old, and also it may impact the training we have around it. So I totally think that it could and it should be the future, but it's only the beginning of the reflection that we have around it.
Perfect. And then this is the last question that I have for now. I know there's a few more in chat, but I only can go so far down. This is by Xaton, and he said, as you mentioned, the people which are playing LoL tend to have better task switching execution function. Is it concerning elite players only, or recreational players, just players who play ranked, for example?
I think so. It does apply for both, because I think so that overall playing one game type will impact, even though it's recreational players. I think it's interesting to look after it in terms of research and study, specifically if there is difference between recreational or elite players, and also if we can see the same difference in terms of improvement. Also, I think that there is one thing that is important that is different between recreational players and elite players is all the other stressors that may have that are around the players. It can be in term of schedule. It can be of term of time playing the game, because it's also, for example, there is some studies that actually looked after the time playing the game, and time playing the game was one of the most important way to improve in-game performance. It's actually pretty logical, right? But if it's one of the most important way to improve in-game performance, it can also be interesting to look after. Is it the same for cognitive or physical variable, right? So I think it's for sure have an influence on both. Maybe a bit more important on professional player, but if we add all the stressors and all the context and all the environmental variable that the professional sport player are with on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, all year long, it may add a lot of variability, and that's the biggest difference with recreational player.
Ah, there you go. My mic's back now. But yeah, that's my questions done in relation to the chat that I can fit in, unfortunately, Clément. Thank you very much for your time.
No problem. Thank you very much.
There's loads in here. I don't know if you got Casey involved in terms of this is the most questions we've had for any of our talks. So I'm sure you'll go through there and answer any of those questions. I'm sure I'll be in contact because we share a lot of research areas as well. Our next one coming up is a video recording as they aren't able